Good afternoon, and welcome to Strategies to Motivate Your Taproom Staff, presented by Secret Hopper. My name is Amanda Camp, and I will be your co host for today. I am a freelance PR and marketing consultant with a background in relationships theory. I currently am working with Andrew at both Craft Beer Professionals and Secret Hopper, and I am also the event manager slash PR manager at Ebb and Flow Fermentations Brewery. Today's topic will help you understand the needs of your staff and provide a unique experience, not just for them, but in turn for your customers as well. A happy tap room is a profitable tap room. Go ahead and drop where you're from, your name, and maybe a unique thing about yourself or your brewery or your tap room down below in the chat, or maybe for some of you over there. But let's go ahead and get started. Andrew, I'll throw it over to you.
Amanda, I'm so excited to have you join me today. I've done so many of these by myself or ones that I've had to lead. So it's great to have a partner in crime today. I really appreciate you and thanks for being here. And everybody, thanks for joining us. You all have spent a lot of time over the past few years looking at slides. So we aim to keep that at a minimum. And also, we want today to be inspiring, but also actionable. We want you to leave today with things you feel the need to implement at your brewery right away. So let's keep this conversational. Don't be afraid to get that chat pretty active. Now, is anybody drinking anything right now? I can't drink real beer all day long, but I'm having a nice non-alcoholic lager. That's going to be fantastic to get me through this webinar. So I'm truly lucky enough to spend my days talking to brewery owners and managers from across the country. And I truly do hope that each of you leave with a sense of urgency to implement something you learned today to see greater success. And don't hesitate to reach out if Secret Hopper can ever help you monitor and maximize your taproom experience for both you, your guest, and your staff. Back to you, Amanda.
Yeah, so before we dive into strategies on how breweries can better motivate and bring their teams together, I'd love to learn, why are we even talking about this? Why is this a challenge facing our tap rooms?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is one of my favorite topics. Now, putting it simply, people are busy. You all watching today and watching in the future, you wear so many different hats. When a new employee is hired, it's often assumed they know what to do. Lack of proper training and lack of communication are common mistakes we see in tap rooms nationwide. I recently led an in-person training at a brewery in Virginia. And until this training, the brewery had never, and I'm going to pause on that. They've been open quite a few years, but they had never had their front of house and back of house staff together all in the same room. There is
Wow.
so much, I know, right? There is so much value in bringing your team together, and we're going to dive into that a little bit shortly. But we got to a point in our session where I started talking about a topic many of you know how passionate I am about: selling more beer to go. It's one thing I push all the time. And I asked the staff in the room that day, what would motivate you to encourage more beer, to sell more beer to go on a Saturday afternoon? So crowlers, growlers, cans, you name it. And for everyone tuning in today, let's kind of make a game out of this. If you were behind the bar on a Saturday afternoon and I said, hey, I'm going to give this reward for selling the most crowlers, growlers, cans, whatever, what would you want to walk out with as a reward for that? So if you're listening right now, feel free to drop in the chat. What would motivate you to sell more beer on a beautiful Saturday afternoon? And while you get your answers in the chat, if you have a drink in hand, please take a sip. So we went around the room at the brewery that day. Some said a gift card to a local restaurant. Some said just simply extra low fills. Some people said a paid day off. But the consensus was that all it would take to get the staff on board to suggest to go beer to the guest was a $20 gift card to Chick-fil-A. I told you no slides, but I'm going to do a few in there throughout. All they wanted was a fancy chicken sandwich. A fancy chicken sandwich would motivate the entire team to want to sell more to go beer on a Saturday. And the data shows that when guests aren't asked a question about purchasing to go beer, they're only going to purchase it on their own 9% of the time. But Amanda, when you ask me, say, hey, Andrew, would you like a 6-pack of that lager to go? The guest says yes 49% of the time. And all it's going to take is a $20 Chick-fil-A gift card for you to motivate your team. And that's the point. It may take less than you think to motivate your staff, but you need to begin by asking to understand what will truly motivate them.
Wow, a chicken sandwich. That sounds so simple, and yet, like you pointed out, it makes such a difference. So, what are some other ways that taproom managers and owners can motivate their staff beyond a chicken sandwich?
Yeah, well, honestly, I'm kind of hungry right now. I wish I had it.
I know, you're making me hungry.
But all Chick-fil-A jokes aside, there are three key areas you can succeed in motivating your team. The first, like the chicken sandwich, is a reward. This could be anything from that coveted Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich, a gift card to another local restaurant, even more beer. A reward is typically something physical. People like presents, right? Who here doesn't like presents? If you're not doing it already, I encourage you to reach out to other local businesses and trade gift cards that you can use to motivate your employees. And for everyone here today, what types of rewards have you seen success with your team? And feel free to drop it in the chat once again. We would love to hear your thoughts on what you're currently seeing success with. What you're doing might motivate someone at another brewery to try that out. Now, another great way to motivate your team is through recognition. This is when you publicly congratulate a team member for doing a great job. Amanda, you're awesome, and I really appreciate you. It could be recognizing them at a team meeting, which we'll get into shortly, or giving them a shout out in an email sent to your entire staff. Recognition may also be the equivalent of a gold star, a trophy, putting your employee's picture on the Employee of the Month wall in the break room. Perhaps even let the team pick who to recognize. It always feels special to be recognized by your peers. Is anybody doing any forms of recognition at your brewery? If so, once again, drop it in the chat, share it with the rest of us. Now, the third and often forgotten aspect of motivating someone is offering them opportunity. Does your star bartender someday want to be a manager or perhaps own a brewery themselves? Providing your team the opportunity to better themselves is a wonderful way to motivate them. Think Cicerone certification, some sort of other professional credential, the opportunity to attend a brewing school, or perhaps even CBP Connects this June in Milwaukee. And Amanda, I'm finally excited to meet you there. So that's going to be a good time. The opportunity for professional development is a great way to motivate your team and make them stronger employees for you. Opportunity can also include giving your team a voice in brewery decisions. Bring them in to discuss the planning of taproom events, beer names, empower them.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well put. Some great points to kind of take home. But what are some of your favorite like metrics to monitor in the tap room to motivate staff?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Amanda. And, I want to take a step back for just a second because I think it's really important that we understand what your staff want. The best way to
Absolutely.
do it is to simply ask. It's extremely important to understand why your staff is working at your brewery. Are they looking at it just as a job? Or as I mentioned before, do they someday want to own their own place? There is great value in understanding your team needs. I recommend regular check-ins. Consider an employee happiness study. This is a survey that you gauge your team's experience working for you. It's important to make sure you aren't assuming their motivations and expectations. You got to begin by asking these questions and not making these assumptions. And some of my favorite metrics to look at in the tap room to motivate staff. Oh, there's so many metrics, and it's so fun to have these conversations because a few years ago, Amanda, we weren't really talking about tap room technology and data, and there's so many great tools you can use to help monitor your tap room. Some of my favorites, you can look at the size of the tap, the amount spent per person, to go beer sales, as I always talk about, tip percentage. I absolutely love tip percentage. Those are a few of my favorites. And when you look at it, engaged guests, they spend more money. Engaged guests tip more. Who on your team doesn't want to make more money? Amanda, you want to make more money, right?
Absolutely. Like you said, who doesn't?
And everybody here, don't you want to make more money? That's why you're dedicated to conversations like this, where we can make a more successful brewery. Shout it out in the chat. Everybody wants to make more money. And our data shows that a guest receiving high engagement spends 30% more than the guest who doesn't feel that connection. When you go to a brewery and, Amanda's serving me, she's teaching me about the brewery. She's making sure I have the exact beverage I want in front of me. She's making me feel appreciated. That's what we all crave. And we've all had the experience that are the opposite as well. In addition, the guest receiving high engagement from a motivated team member tips an average of 27%. That's several points higher than the average guest receiving lower levels of engagement. And once again, a more motivated team member is more likely to want to authentically build these relationships with your guests and engage at a higher level. And ways to track these metrics, I talk about contests. Contests are a great way to get your team excited about being the best they can be. And one of my favorites, no surprise, to go beer contest. With contests, however, be sure to not just repeat the same one over and over again. So look at the metrics that you can monitor, and we're going to dive a little bit more into this shortly, but mix it up over time. Now, Amanda, what strategies have worked well at your brewery to help motivate staff?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of like what you touched on, we like to kind of shake things up a little bit. We don't like to do the same contest over and over again. So again, as you noticed, to go sales are really big for us as well. You've got all the data to prove that we're heading in the right direction. So a lot of it does revolve around to go sales, or around Christmas and holidays, gift cards, things like that. And pretty regularly, we offer those contests for also our employees to get gift cards, especially to our sister restaurant, which is a fine dining establishment. So they get really excited to kind of treat themselves, to kind of pamper themselves a little bit on our dime. It's really nice, friendly competition. And we ask them, like you mentioned, we talk to them. We say, what are your suggestions? What would be fun for you? Because not only is that friendly competition that they like, but it makes sure it stays friendly. Everyone gets a chance to win, but you still keep that competitive edge.
I love it. Those are all great ideas. And in just like your guests who come to your tap room, each one of your team members, has different expectations. They're craving a different kind of experience. And as your job as a manager or owner, it's your responsibility to figure out what's going to motivate and provide that best experience for each person on your team. Now, Amanda, we talked quite a bit, but there's something you shared with me that I absolutely loved. Is there anything that you do daily to let your team know you appreciate their hard work?
Absolutely. So we like the show and tell method. Like you touched on earlier, we like to tell them that we appreciate them. We try to be as specific as possible, but then we like to show them. We have what we call our self care station. It is a staff only area that's kind of tucked away, so consumers are not they're not privy to it. They have no say in it. It is just for our staff to pamper themselves. So that's anything from medical, feminine hygiene, first aid products, all the way to things like hand lotion, of course, when they're not handling glassware food, to little snacks they can eat on breaks, just some motivators, and they can request those things too. So as long as it's reasonable and it's not, totally expensive to keep stocked, we like to listen to that. It also makes a huge difference because if your staff member has a headache and they forgot to bring Advil or Tylenol or whatever, those smiles, those are gonna be fake. They're gonna be smiling through the pain. Their focus is not gonna be on the customer and their tap room experience. It's gonna be on, "Oh, I've got 2 hours and 22, 21 more minutes until my shift ends." So by providing those things for them, not only is that saying we appreciate you, but it's saying like, we're gonna put your needs first so that you can put the needs of the consumer first as well.
Oh, I really like that, Amanda. I think so often when we talk about motivating staff, we talk about the recognition, the Chick-fil-A gift cards, like I talked about earlier. But really, it's truly about supporting your staff and making them feel appreciated. And I love what you're doing at Ebb.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, our focus is really on letting them be the best that they can be and supporting that. So how can you keep your entire team at their best and being the best they can be as opposed to just, a couple of team members feeling like they're constantly the ones being recognized?
Yeah, that's a really great question because we just keep having to go beer contests all the time, and Amanda wins every single time. Everybody else here today, it might get a little bit frustrated, and no one wants to see the same person recognized over and over again. Even if you're doing an amazing job, Amanda, it can be frustrating and discouraging for the others. It's important that you mix up the metrics that you're monitoring. Do the to go beer contest one week, do highest tip percentage the next. And as I mentioned, tip percentage is a great metric to monitor engagement. If I'm behind the bar and I'm constantly receiving a 17% tip, but Amanda's constantly getting a 27% tip, there's something to be said about the level of engagement she's giving to the guest. A higher tip percentage definitely represents and corresponds with higher engagement. So think about doing the highest tip percentage, the greatest average tab increase over a period of time, not just highest tab, but who's perhaps most improves, who's putting the effort in to encourage that second drink, encourage beer to go. Little things you can do to keep the tabs getting that much higher. Also, consider having your team vote on who's the best team player. Once again, empower them, make it part of the process to decide, who's going to get rewarded, and really find ways to highlight everyone's strengths to keep everyone on your team motivated.
Absolutely, I love that. And here at Ebb, everyone kind of has their own logins so that we can monitor metrics. But how do you recommend that breweries handle it when they're shared logins?
Yeah, that's a good question. It makes it a lot easier when your POS allows you to have that, individualized login where each team member is ringing up their own transactions. But first, I would recommend ask your POS provider what they're capable of and what data they provide. But one way you can measure success when you're dealing with shared logins is by monitoring trends. If you have three people behind the bar and you can consistently see, I'm going to pickle myself again, that when I'm behind the bar, tabs are lower, tip percentage is less, you can monitor those trends. But once again, if Amanda's behind the bar and you're seeing higher tabs, higher tips, an overall greater level of teamwork, you can see what's going on there. And you'll quickly figure out who the weak link is. They might need a little extra training, a little extra help, which you want to make sure you provide to them. But you can also see the trends that show you, who those rock stars are behind the bar, who are doing a great job of engaging with, the guest, but also other team members.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, like we talked, having open communication is obviously important with your teams. But what are some ways in which we can successfully bring our teams together?
So I'm going to throw a question to everybody listening today. I'm just curious, how often are you bringing your team together? I'm going to dive into the strategies that I like to see for team building right now. But, I'd love to hear how frequently you're bringing your team together in one room. And I'm not just talking for 5 minutes before a shift, but how often are you taking intentional time to bring your team together? And what I recommend trainings, meetings, and team building activities. As mentioned earlier, often breweries hire someone new and just throw them behind the bar. Take the time to train your team, perhaps a few training shifts, an onboarding manual. Make sure they know the story behind your brewery and what you stand for, and also understand the beers. Give them the necessary skills to be successful, and don't just assume they know what to do. And don't just stop these trainings, after those first couple shifts. Continue these trainings as part of team meetings. Team meetings are when you bring your team together in one room. And when you do it, don't just do it because it's what you think you're supposed to do. We've all been to meetings. We're wondering, why in the world am I here? We've all had that happen. And it's really, really frustrating. And it's often a waste of time. When you go into a meeting, have a goal. What do you want your team to learn and come out of from this meeting? And have an agenda. Don't just come into that meeting and say, Amanda, what do you want to talk about today? What's on your mind? Granted, conversations like that where you allow for free flowing communication can definitely lead to important topics, but make sure you have an agenda and plan ahead, keep it organized. Once again, take the time to plan this out prior. That way, it's a valuable use of everyone's time. It's also,
Absolutely.
go ahead, Amanda.
Oh no, I'm just in full agreement. Like I love everything that you're throwing out there. Absolutely.
And meetings can be fun, right? They don't have to be boring. They don't have to feel like a lecture. Find ways you can engage with your team, whether it's the head brewer talking about the latest beers on the menu, or Amanda, you just going around the room seeing what you can do to motivate people better on your staff. Make sure you have a plan. This is when you take the opportunity to ask them their thoughts on the upcoming event calendar that you have. How can they be part of it? How can they help? Talk to them and make them feel part of it, because your team, they're your frontline workers. Make sure they feel valued. But it's also important, it's very important to bring your staff together through team building activities. Getting together outside of your typical context without responsibilities, it opens the doors for people to better connect. I didn't think of that line myself. I read in a book recently. I absolutely loved it, and I want to repeat it again. Getting together outside of your typical context without responsibilities opens the doors for people to better connect. I truly do love that. And what I'm talking about there is, think bowling, think visiting other breweries together, some sort of celebration where no one's in work mode. And overall, trainings, meetings, and team building, they aren't one time activities. You need to be consistent with them, whatever that schedule looks like for your breweries. For some breweries, it could be every other week. For other breweries, it could be once a quarter. Whatever makes sense for you, be consistent, and this is how you're going to see results. So, Amanda, what are some things you do at Ebb and Flow to bring your team together?
Yeah, absolutely. So beyond all the contests and just, the words of affirmation, we try to really include them in, their brewery love languages. We like to talk to them and really find out what works for our team, both as individuals and as the team as a whole. We like to do offsite things. Even our upcoming holiday party, we're a little late, industry. It's offsite, so we are encouraging we're still in that work team mode, but it's not at work. They're kinda getting a chance to relax and really feel appreciated, and, like you said, going offsite, doing things that aren't just team building in the traditional, like, icebreaker meetings that could have been emails since. We found that that's so important in keeping them happy, keeping them engaged, motivated, and the longer that they're like that, the longer we get to keep them. So we're not having to train, a million different people, and then we have a great team that we love, that we feel supported by as well. And I am never worried about my team members that are behind the bar on, one of my big events that I'm like, "Oh, this has to go well," because I know that they're gonna be rock stars because they're as fired up about it as me because they've been involved in I'll be like, "Hey, I'm planning this. What would you wanna see?" And then they see that thing being implemented and they're like, "Oh, I did that." And they're gonna point that out. So it makes for a better time when they're having fun, it comes across, and we have so many regulars that come in because of that energy. It's great to see.
It's truly all about the energy. And one thing I love just about visiting breweries is, when you're able to build the connection that you just talked about with that regular, you said, that guest obviously is coming to your brewery to enjoy the beer, but they're coming to see that team member. And that's truly what our industry is about, building these meaningful connections, of course, over the shared love of a delicious pint in front of us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we're all about serving up all sorts of personality, beer and people wise.
So,
So
Amanda, go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead. I was just gonna say that, I mean, we've covered all of these really wonderful points about cohesion and motivating teams and really bringing them together. But beyond just, the feel good of we've made them feel good and, that's a reward in of itself. But what are the benefits of building that kind of culture, both for, owners and managers and even consumers?
Yeah. So before I give you why you should be doing all this, because there's a lot of really great reasons, I want to share a story of experience that I had. And when I go anywhere, whether it's another brewery, a store, another sort of business, I'm always just watching staff interactions with themselves and with the guest. And recently, I spoke at CiderCon in Chicago. It was a great time, learning from our friends in the cider world. But as I'm on the airplane back, I'm sitting towards the back, and you know how the airplanes do. They have the beverage cart, they have the food cart. The beverage cart went a lot quicker. The food cart went a lot quicker than the beverage cart. They were just handing out their Biscoff cookies or their pretzels or whatever it may be. So that person finished pretty quickly. And the other flight attendant was still passing out drinks. They were pouring the drinks. It took a little bit more time. But one thing that I saw happen that day, I truly loved. So the flight attendant who was passing out the snacks started at the back of the plane asking the other passengers, "Can I get you something to drink?" Mind you, this wasn't the flight attendant offering beverages. The flight attendant offering beverages was halfway down the aisle, quite a few, rows away. But the other flight attendant who was responsible for food started at the back of the plane asking what the passengers wanted. And when they said, "I'll have a Coke, I'll have a coffee," whatever it may be, they ran all the way up to the beverage cart and brought it back to the passenger in the last row. They continued to do this until the entire plane was served a beverage. You know what? No one asked them to do this, but they were doing it because they wanted to help their team member out and make their life easier. And guess what? It made for a better guest experience. I got my coffee a lot quicker and I was a lot happier and I appreciated this. So teamwork, it really impacts everyone. And Amanda, if you and I are working behind the bar together, maybe someday we'll get the opportunity to do that. If we don't get along, if we never get to hang out with one another, we're not going to work efficiently together. I'm not going to offer to help you out. I'm not going to jump in. I'm not going to know the flow of things. But if we go bowling together, we go out for pizza, we go touring at other breweries, we've got the time to get to know each other. That level of team building is going to be so much higher, and it's going to result in a lot of really great benefits. And everybody, once again, please forgive me. I'm going to put some slides up there. But what you're going to see when you are able to successfully motivate your team, you're going to see greater passion. You're going to see greater teamwork. You're going to see higher tabs. Tabs are 30% higher when you look at high engagement versus low engagement. All of you as managers and owners, you're going to see higher retention. Your staff is not going to want to leave because they're having so much fun and they're happy with the money that they're making. Your job is going to become easier. And who doesn't want to have an easier job, right? And you're going to see greater success in the tap room. Just like Amanda, you mentioned, the guests are going to keep coming back and back because they feel that positive energy and they get so excited when they come to your tap room. Now, you should be getting your staff motivated year round, not just immediately following this conversation. It's continual. Once again, do it year round, monitor different metrics, and get them excited about their position and your company 12 months out of the year. It truly takes regular commitment to see these results. And all of you here today, you're here because you want to successfully motivate your staff. You want to give them the skills for success. And as you do all this, it's just going to create a more positive culture in your workplace that's going to give you all these values that we see on the screen right now.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, all amazing points. I could not agree more. And some of that data is staggering. Definitely supports the cause, right? But yeah, so let's take a moment and see if there's any questions or anything. I know we've covered a lot. We want to make sure that we clarify everything.
And anyone listening today, if you'd like to see us dive into any other data, we have a really fascinating set of taproom data. When I first started Secret Hopper almost 6 years ago, I had all these theories of ways to, engage with staff and guests on a higher level. Of course, encourage the second beer. Of course, encourage beer to go. But there are little things like no guest is ever going to leave your taproom and say, geez, Amanda didn't introduce herself. But guess what? When your staff take the time to introduce themselves, they're going to see higher tabs. They're going to see, higher tips. It's just little tricks and touches you can do to build those higher tabs and build that higher level of engagement. That's going to make people come to your tap room even more. It's all about creating these experiences, and you can do that for your staff by simply motivating them and giving them the tools they need to succeed.
Absolutely. I think you did just an amazing job of laying out all of those tips and the kind of reasoning behind that as well. But of course, anyone listening or after the fact, please feel free to reach out. Andrew, if you wouldn't mind throwing your email address into the chat. Looks like we do have a question. It says, do you have any questions, or I'm sorry, suggestions for swag sale prompts for tap rooms? Ooh, that's a good one, John.
That is a great question, John, because just like, encouraging that second beer or beer to go, you need to make people aware of the swag that you have in your tap room. There's a couple suggestions that I have. Obviously, as you're checking someone out, you can say, hey, would you like to take some of this limited edition merchandise with you? You can always ask the question. But one thing I really am passionate about as well is menus. I love menus. Fun data fact there, when you give your guest a physical menu, they're going to spend 35% more than the guest without the menu. But one thing you can put on the menus, you can have your beers, maybe a little QR code to limited edition options, but you can also have your to-go and merchandise options on the menu. Make them aware. You have to really think about it. A lot of people going to breweries these days, especially as we're seeing more market share grow, they might not have been to a brewery for the first time. They might not know that you offer to-go beer. They might not know that you have merchandise. So put it on the menu. They're going to read it, make it aware. But when we're talking about merchandise as well, make sure it's in a visible location in your tap room. Don't have it in a dark corner that no one ever goes to. Make sure your merchandise rack is approachable. People like to touch things. No one likes to bother the bartender behind the bar on a busy Saturday afternoon when the line's 20 people deep to say, hey, can I have that t-shirt? Guess what? they're just going to leave. So, have it in a place they can grab it, feel it, love it, and go purchase it themselves. But put it in a place, make sure it's touchable, make sure you have it organized, make sure you have pricing up there. Once again, there's sometimes we don't want to bother the staff. We want to make sure we have all the information we need, whether that's directly on the merchandise, whether that's on the menu, or whether that's on the slower times where the staff members can engage doing it. And one thing that I also recommend, I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on this. Thoughts on having your team wear your shirt. If you and all, I haven't noticed, Amanda and I are wearing matching shirts today. Maybe this was planned. Maybe this wasn't planned. I don't really know. But you want your team to have pride in your brand. When I go to a brewery and I see them wearing another, brewery's t-shirt, I'm going to go, oh, Amanda, what do you think of that brewery? And what are you going to say? Amanda?
Well, if we're talking about this one in particular, because I do have to shout out to you, this is the comfiest thing ever. And honestly, that's what we want our staff to say too. That's how we get most of our sales. Honestly, if they're wearing it, which we encourage but don't require, we have one that, man, like you could fall asleep in it. It's so soft. And so our staff will wear it because they can sling, they can move in it. And we have had more than one regular that I've overheard the conversation of, that's a neat shirt. And one of my rock star bartenders will go, yeah, it's the comfiest thing ever. And they go, oh, really? And she'll pull one off the shelf. She'll let them feel it. Like you said, people like to touch things, and that's a sale. Boom, they're done. And then if she's out in the wild, she'll go, oh yeah, we do really cool things like this, and she'll engage them and have conversations. So, hopefully whatever they're saying is good, but a variety of things will seal the deal.
No, I love it. You definitely want your staff to have pride in wearing your merchandise. And one experience that I had, I was visiting out of town in my travels. And, when I'm out of town, I always try to visit a ton of local breweries, probably like many of you all do. And the server who was helping me was wearing another brewery shirt. So I said, hey, what's that brewery like? She said, it's great, of course. That's why I'm wearing the shirt. And guess what? I went and had my second drink there. I wouldn't have asked about that brewery unless she was wearing the shirt, but I definitely encourage wearing your own shirt. That way, I'm not thinking about the brewery next door around the corner. That way I'll have my second beverage at your brewery.
Yeah,
Now,
that's a good point.
Amanda, do
We've
we
got
have any more questions?
Yeah, and actually we have a few comments about just that, is that, when their team wears a certain thing, looks like especially baseball hats. They always sell them. That's fantastic. A comment about the taproom having better swag than the website. That's absolutely true for us too. But it does look like we have a question about the best way to add a QR code for merch. Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, there's a lot of free QR code generators you can find on the internet. Literally, I think it's freeqrcodegenerator.com or something very similar. So when you're creating your physical menu, just create that QR code. And I'm assuming that if you have a QR code, you'd want to go to merch. You probably have merch offered on your website, so you'd want to have it linked in there. I imagine your website provider or POS company can help with that, but make sure it all connects. And additionally, having your merch available for people not in your tap room is a great way to have them, when they leave, say, oh, I forgot to grab that shirt because it was so busy that day, but now I can order it and have it delivered. So definitely get that QR code from one of the free generators, pop it on there just like your to-go options, and see if sales increase.
Yeah, all great suggestions. Yeah, no, I love the engagement here too. So I do want to wrap it up, but lastly, I want to make sure that for everyone watching this, what is one thing, just one thing that after this you should do? What should it be?
Oh, that's a great question, Amanda. We talked about it. You talked about it. Tell your team you appreciate them. Everybody really loves to be appreciated. So everybody today, when you see your staff, just let them know that you appreciate them. Everybody likes to feel appreciated. And if we didn't have time to answer any questions today, feel free to shoot an email to andrew@secrethopper.com. I'm also putting my Calendly link in the chat. I spend a lot of time on Zoom and things like this. I am always up for a phone call if we can provide you some value. So I would love to connect. Feel free to reach out through scheduling a phone call, through email. Amanda, I appreciate you once again. This has been so fun to do with someone else besides me talking at a screen for about an hour. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just that, we would love to provide you as listeners with the taproom data that Andrew talked about. I mean, those are really staggering, and you can really learn a lot about what's working, what's not, what maybe should be working. But it just helps you better understand and motivate your team and provide that unique and positive experience for your patrons. So definitely reach out to Andrew if you are interested in how can we use that data? How can we get data on our own tap room? It's really invaluable. And I think you'll really learn a lot and see that translated into your profits.
Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us today, and thanks for being dedicated to making the most awesome tap room experience possible, not just for your guest, but for your team. And it'll make your life a little bit easier and make you a little bit more profitable in that tap room. So, everybody, we'll see you soon. Cheers.
Cheers.